This is Secret America with your hosts, Jack Danger and James Clary.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Jack Danger along with James Clary, and this is our first time doing the live stream of not just X, but we're also on YouTube and Rumble. And after the show, we will also be on Spotify and Apple Podcasts from now on. That way we can make sure that, we can spread information to as many people as possible, James. And obviously the first thing that we want to talk about, the first information we want to spread, is what has happened with Donald Trump and the whole Iran thing that's going on right now. Apparently, over the weekend, they had the United States apparently bombed Iran's nuclear facilities. And to me, James, this is rather a scary moment because everybody's kind of touting this as like a big victory for America. But you got to think that, if you're Iran and you just let one country bomb your nuclear facilities and do nothing about it, how does that make you look? I mean, what is that? That makes you might as well not even be a country. But then if, so they might obviously do something about it out of sheer pride, James. It's almost like they have to do something about it here. And say they don't. Say they surrender to the demands of the United States and they just let those nuclear facilities go by the wayside. All that does is create many, many more terrorist cells that are going to join Iran. Because you got to look at it this way. The terrorist cells are terrorists against the United States because they say we are imperialists. We are the ones that cause problems. We are the, quote, think of ourselves as the world's policemen. And we kill their women and children and everybody else. And what did we just do? We just acted like the world's policemen, and we did bomb their nuclear facilities without any declaration of war and without any provocation on their side. So you got terrorist cells, thanks to Joe Biden, all over the United States, just waiting to be activated. I foresee this as either two possibilities, James. Either it's going to start a huge war and a World War III type thing, or the more likely thing, Iran maybe stands down, comes back to the negotiating table, and then all of a sudden you have tons of terrorist attacks all over the United States of America. James, how do you foresee this going?
Well, look, I think my stance. I'm rabid anti-war. I used to write essays on Facebook in 2015 when Donald Trump was running on why I was voting for Trump, because he was more of the anti-war president. He's spoken out many, many times of what a waste of blood and treasure the Iraq war was, and how we shouldn't have, been in Afghanistan for 20 years. But it's not just those countries. I mean, look at Libya and Syria. How's Syria work out for us? Do you know that we've had troops in Syria for 12 years?
How did Vietnam work out for us?
Right, exactly. So what are we doing in Syria? Do you know that the current leadership in Syria are Al-Qaeda? The leadership in Libya, we took out Gaddafi because he was going to do a currency backed by gold, and he wasn't going to use the petrodollar anymore. We take him out. Now we got radical jihadis that literally there are open slave markets in the downtown of Tripoli in Libya. I mean, I'm flustered because history tells us that it's next to impossible to do these surgical strikes. I mean, I know, look, everybody's cheering. I saw a poll that 10,000 people voted in on the PBD podcast. I'll give them credit. They've got a huge following. They did an emergency broadcast last night. They did a poll, and after the first 10,000 voted, it was 60-40. 60% supported what Trump was doing, and 40% did not. Now, I would say if this lasts more than a couple weeks, and we get more engaged and the war ramps up, it's going to totally flip. That at least half of that 60% are anti-war. But look, they're all convinced, this is a surgical strike. All we have to do is go bomb a couple people. So Iran now, as you know, Jack, I want to get your take on this. They're threatening to close the Straits of Hormuz, which 80% of all the oil coming through the Middle East goes through the strait. Now, if they close it, what's going to happen? There's going to be more attacks, right? I mean, of course, we can't let that happen. So the war escalates. Then Iran retaliates against us. I've seen this movie before, and it never works out well. And it pisses me off. I think the neocons have the ear of Donald Trump. I think people like Steve Bannon, who visited the White House 3 days ago, and Tulsi Gabbard, who were telling him, Mr. President, please have patience. Try and do this with diplomacy and negotiation. Now, having said all that, there might be things that we don't know, Jack. Trump may have intel, but look, I'm sure you've seen, and I'll stop after this, but I'm sure you've seen the videos of Bibi Netanyahu going back to 1999 saying Iran is 2 months away from having a nuclear program. He did it 33 times. Kind of interesting that it's 33. It's always 33 if you know Masonic symbols. 33 times since 1999, he said as Iran is on the verge of a nuclear weapon. That whole story is a bunch of bullshit. I'm going to call that out right now. It's not about nuclear weapons. And if you want to later on, I can go into what I think the real reasons are.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's interesting, what's going on in this whole thing. It seems strange, because as we spoke about before, Donald Trump does not want endless wars. He's against that kind of thing. And he seems to be against, war in general. And now I know people are saying that this was to prevent them from having a nuclear weapon. But as you said, they've always almost had a nuclear weapon. What doesn't make sense to me is they've had these nuclear facilities. They got enriched uranium and billions of dollars from Joe Biden and Barack Obama. If they would have nuclear weapons by now. And the only reason you have nuclear weapons, James, is so that you have mutually assured destruction. Nobody uses nuclear weapons because now that everybody has nuclear weapons, they're afraid that, if you use it, they're going to use it on you. And that would start what you would call the nuclear war that everybody was afraid about. So everybody having a nuclear weapon is better than some people having a nuclear weapon but see, the problem is there's also a second caveat to that. In Iran, in their specific religion, dying for what they're fighting for is a good thing. It's actually something they want to do. So on that side, them having a nuclear weapon can be a bad thing because say they fire it at us to kill the infidels. Well, us firing at them is not going to hurt them. It's not something that they're afraid of because dying for, Allah or whatever it is the best possible thing you can do. So I can see that mutually assured destruction does not work for Iran. But I will say that honestly, if they were going to have nuclear weapons, Donald Trump said within weeks, which is strange to me, because if they're going to have nuclear weapons, they would already have them by now. Look at it like this if you're Iran, okay? You've had your nuclear program and billions of dollars from the United States you've been getting for decades now. Okay, if you have a nuclear weapon, it's not going to be at one of these nuclear facilities. Donald Trump sent out decoys before he sent out these bombers to take out the nuclear facilities, right? He sent out decoys from the West to make it look like they were coming from the West. Then he sent out the actual bombers from the East that went out and bombed these nuclear facility sites. Now, if you're Iran, then you got to know that, you got to think that you're probably having a decoy yourself in terms of the nuclear sites. I'm not going to have nuclear sites that are easily detectable, that they know where my weapons are being made. If I'm Iran and I know that countries don't want me having nuclear sites, these nuclear sites are underground. My nuclear weapons are made underground. So these things that he hit, A, may not be the correct nuclear sites. B, will cause a hell of a lot more terrorist attacks. C, could cause possibly a world war. And D, may have all been for nothing, despite everybody praising it. Now, in terms of imminent threat, was it a good decision? I think it was a good decision in terms of us possibly being destroyed by nuclear weapons. Because in Russia, James, their religion doesn't say, dying for fighting what you believe for is the best thing that can happen to you. But in Iran, it does. So I would be, Iran's not worried about mutually assured destruction. So no, we shouldn't let Iran have nuclear weapons. The main question I have here, James, and I want you to answer this for me. The main question I have is why now? That is what I want to know. Why are we firing bombs at their nuclear facilities now? Not yesterday or not 6 months ago, not 10 years ago. They've had the same religion since the 70s. Why now, James?
Well, look, we have to go back, and we talked about it the last show, but I think we have to go back to the Wesley Clark memo that named 7 countries in 5 years that we were going to take out. And we have literally taken them all out except one country, Iran. This has been on the books ever. And Jack, something you have talked to me about and educated me on is predictive programming. Did you know the plot for Top Gun Maverick is about a rogue country in the Middle East that's developing a nuclear program, and that the mission for the Top Guns was to go into these, fly through these mountains and take out these nuclear sites in this unnamed Middle Eastern country. I mean, it's
really,
yes.
What was the ending of that movie? What happened?
Well, they took out the nuclear facilities.
Well, I mean, did that end their nuclear sites or threat?
Yeah. So Maverick ends up flying the mission himself, and it's proving it's doable. And I'm reading this by executing a flawless test run. Rooster saves Maverick's life, but ends up getting shot down. Maverick goes back into hostile territory to rest after an intense dogfight. They make it backside. The film ends with Maverick and Rooster reconciling and Maverick rekindling his relationship, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but they took out the nuclear sites. That's what that whole movie was about. Here it is again. We got the Wesley Clark memo. We've got PNAC, Project for a New American Century, that talked about how all of these countries in the Middle East need to be taken over and that we needed a new Pearl Harbor. That was 9/11. Then you go back to 96 and the cold break agenda that Bibi Netanyahu was pushing, which said Israel should not try to make peace with these countries. We need to take them all over. This has been planned for decades, and Trump just walked right into it. And that's why I'm against it more than anything. Look, I hope it ends up that we just do a few strikes. It lasts a couple weeks and we're done. But one interesting caveat, you brought up Russia. Did you know that Trump at the G7, this is related, Trump said that the G7 needs to be turned back into the G8. It was under Obama where they kicked Russia out. Trump,
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think it totally ties into this. He also said we should let China in and have a G9. I think Trump went to Russia and to China, to Xi and Putin. He got their blessing and they're okay to do this attack, because I don't think he would risk going to World War III. I just don't think he's that stupid. And he said, look, in return, I'm going to bring you into the fold and make you part of the G7.
You know what's interesting, James? We have a comment from Free. He's got an excellent show, and you should go on his website sometime. Our listeners, is Freedom Uncut. He's got an excellent show. Are You Smarter Than a Politician? So he knows a lot about things that we know about as well. And he said something interesting. He said Hollywood is trying to convince us to get in a Middle East war. And you know how a lot of times there are such things as predictive programming, where there's like, it's almost as if things that they do on the television is supposed to either predict what's going to happen, kind of soften the blow for you, or if it's kind of try to plant a seed inside your mind. I actually, believe it or not, the Newsweek actually did an article on one of my posts last year, and it was a post about the Civil War movie that just came out. And how they were trying to plant the idea of civil war inside the minds of Americans in case, the election was stolen again. And it kind of seems like Free is correct on this. Kind of seems like the same similar thing with this whole Maverick thing that you were talking about. I've never seen it, but I do know that a lot of those things happen. Why do you think that, like The Simpsons and things like that, can predict what's going on in the future? They don't actually predict what's going on. What that is predictive programming, and it's supposed to plant that seed in your mind. So when you see it, you're more likely to accept what's happening as real rather than a conspiracy. Go ahead.
Then I always have to ask you this, Jack. What's the other thing that you talk about with the occult, where you have to project what you're going to do? You have to say it out loud. What is that called again? I always forget.
Oh man, now you got it's It starts with an R. I'm going to have to think about that. I want to say it's, I don't know. I'll have to look that up. But basically what that, I'm sorry, go ahead. No,
No,
basically the principle with that is the fact that you have to kind of project what you're going to do before it happens. Karmic retribution. That's what it is.
Yes.
It's karmic retribution. And what the Satanists do there, and a lot of our politicians and a lot of the Hollywood celebrities are such Satanists. And what they do there is a lot of times you'll see them like do weird hand signals, right? Or you'll see them say this or that. And what they're doing is they're putting out kind of a way of telling you what they're going to do before they do it. And the reason that they have to do that is so they do not receive karmic retribution. They believe that if they tell you what they're going to do beforehand, and they don't have to come out and say it, they just have to, use hand signals or use like euphemisms or whatever it is.
Or
to
do
kind
it
of
in an episode of The Simpsons.
exactly
Right?
to just kind of tell you what's going to happen, right? So, and the reason they do that though is so that they do not receive karma for it. They believe that if they tell you beforehand what's going to happen, that their God, their Satan, will not give them karma for any of their evil deeds. That's basically what that belief is. And it's similar to predictive programming, except for in predictive programming, they kind of plant the seed inside your mind. And, it's interesting because a lot of the things that these people are saying, like you even got, JD Vance, right? Some of the things that they're saying about this Iran thing just totally does not make sense to me. So JD Vance, the vice president, came out and said, we're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program. And see, that's interesting to me because if they're trying to say that they can bomb Iran's nuclear sites without Iran taking any offense to that. And to me, I've always said that if Iran allows this to happen, then, how can they be taken seriously as a country from now on? So to me, it's either got to be a war or it's either going to be a war or it's going to be a lot of different terrorist attacks, because how terrorists get created, James. They get created through you doing exactly what they say that you're going to do, which is, bomb their countries from afar or, be the world's policeman, which is basically what we've done here. Now, was it necessary? Yes, I believe it was necessary. But do the terrorist cells see it that way? No, I don't believe it. And I do believe it is a preemptive kind of strike, so to make things so that way at least Iran can't have nuclear weapons. Because as we spoke about, James, their religion makes it to where they're not afraid of a mutually assured destruction. They're not afraid of nuclear weapons being launched back at them. So they can launch their nuclear weapons whenever they want. So it's better to take that out and risk possible terrorist cell attacks than risk all-out nuclear war with a country that doesn't care if they die, James.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'll tell you one of the keenest insights I've seen, and I know some of our listeners, by the way, it is so cool to be able to see some of our listeners in the chat finally. If you guys didn't know, we're using a new software program and we love it. Jack found it and it's amazing. But Dan Caldwell was one of those two guys that was fired from the Pentagon. They said he was leaking. No, it wasn't because he was leaking. It's because he pushed back against the military industrial complex and warned against escalating a war with Iran. He said specifically it could lead to unnecessary escalation. He cautioned against falling for what he described as the regime change program, which is what all of these elites want. Look, no one here is defending the mullahs in Iran. They're authoritarian, they're corrupt, they're criminal, they do terrible things to women, they push gays off buildings, they're horrible. But to try and push this progressive liberal agenda on foreign countries, I don't have to repeat myself. Well, how has it worked out in the past? Every country we try this in, Jack, it turns into a nightmare. If you go back to the Iraq War, look, 90% of all people were in favor of that war. We supported George Bush. And do you remember that it was in with like 2 weeks that we took down that statue of Saddam Hussein? And everyone was like, yay! And then George Bush flew out to an aircraft carrier and they had a big celebration. That war went on for another 10 years. Thousands of Americans lost their legs, their limbs, their lives. We spent $1 trillion. These people that think it's just, look, I hope and pray. It's small. And I've already said, I don't want to repeat myself, but history shows us that we're likely to get drawn into a much deeper and heavier engagement, and that scares the hell out of me.
And I completely understand. The only difference now though is this was more of a strike to stop them from getting a nuclear weapon that they're not afraid to be used on them, so they're willing to use it anytime on us. And a nuclear weapon like that could rip across multiple states. It could literally have multiple states vanish at one specific time. So that is worrisome. Now, if the conflict goes any further than this, then I can see where we can get into that. But back in like the whole Vietnam days and stuff, there weren't weapons like this but there weren't countries that had capabilities like this. Here, we're not trying to do a regime change. Those countries, we were trying to regime change. We were trying to change the leadership. Here, would we like leadership change? Sure. But that's not what we're going for. We're just going for stopping their nuclear capabilities right now. Now, if it gets to where we start going after regime change, James, then I can agree with you. Then I'm going to start calling it like it is, and it's going to be a big problem.
Here's the problem, though. Israel wants regime change.
They do. And Israel does.
Here's the problem with regime change, and the historical precedents are all there. But first of all, there's going to be a fragmented power vacuum. If you take the mullahs out, look what happened in Syria. Massive civil war. You know, the 2 million, 3 million immigrants that poured into Europe, most of those were from Syria because of our and the West involvement in the civil war. I mean, the collapse of the Islamic Republic, you'd have chaos. You'd have ethnic groups like the Kurds, the Baluchis, the Arabs are all going to try and gain power. All you have to do is look at Libya post-Gaddafi or Iraq post-Saddam. Civil war, refugee crisis, mass executions. So look, the goal would be to have a U.S.-aligned secular government, but it would require enormous political and cultural shifts within this country. You also might get a more hardline Islamist government. They could be more hardline than the mullahs are. And we don't know the outcomes. And that's what scares me, Jack.
Let me ask you something, James, because I just saw something that was kind of funny. Okay, so would you say that Pakistan would benefit from Iran's nuclear facilities being bombed?
Well, yeah, because Pakistan is a nuclear power.
Now look at this. So I don't know if this happened right before or right after, but it's quite hilarious if you ask me. Apparently, it was the same day, I believe, the government of Pakistan formally recommended President Trump for the 2026 Nobel Peace Prize. Now, I find that hilarious because that's kind of like it's so funny because he bombed Iran, which helped them out, which was not peace. But then they give him the peace prize. They're recommending him for the peace prize right after this. It's just funny to me. That just sounded like a whole funny thing here. But James, there's a lot more that's going to be happening with this. And
comment.
Go ahead.
That last comment, I just want to read it from Scientific Libertarian. I'm so glad we get comments. Can we bill Israel for those bunker busters, or do taxpayers have to eat the cost again? I think that's a really valid point. Those things, I think, okay, well, the planes to carry them cost $2 billion a piece. These stealth bombers are the most costly plane manufactured on Earth. I think the bombs are like $100 million a piece, maybe more than that. I'll look it up. But yeah, why are we paying for that? What threat does Iran pose to us? That's what, even if they develop the bomb, they don't have the ICBMs to hit America. I mean, well, somebody tell me what threat?
I will tell you that the threat is if they can get those nuclear bombs, I'm sure they can find a ways to deliver them. And that's the thing. That's the main threat. Like with other countries, James, their mutually assured destruction scares both countries, so neither country uses their weapon. In Iran, their country being blown off the map would not scare them. They could bomb us with nuclear weapons and not care if they get killed because their religion gives them that sort of cult-like peace. To where, okay, I'm ready to die. So that's why I do believe this did have to happen. Now, if it goes any further, then we're going to have some serious problems.
Yeah, well, that's all we can do is kind of hope and pray that it doesn't go further. I'm just, again, all I'm going to state is if you use history as our guide, as soon as we think we've won one of these wars, look what happens. I mean, ISIS arose out of the chaos that we created in the Middle East. Of course, we actually
Obama funded them, though. Obama actually created ISIS. Yeah. He was like, hey, we need more people to hate America. Here's, $10 billion.
And you know what trained for, though? ISIS originally, you're right, Obama, under the direction of John Brennan, head of the CIA at the time, funded, trained, recruited ISIS. They were trained at a secret base in Jordan that the former Jordanian president admitted all this. This was in 2012. But the reason ISIS was created by the United States was to take out Assad in Syria. That was the goal. So when you get into war, you get into bed with these unsavory characters. I mean, these jihadis. I mean, and now they're running Syria. Great job, guys.
And that's usually what happens. It's the same thing when we trained and funded the Mujahideen to go against the Soviet Union. In Afghanistan, that we trained, funded them. They took down the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union retreated out of Afghanistan, and then they started training their weapons towards us in terms of Afghanistan. So every time we fund these countries, we help them win their war through proxy war with us, and then they train their weapons on us. But James, again, this is going to be a very developing story over the next 4 years, and there's going to be new developments all the time. I'm hoping it ends here and we get, negotiation and peace talks, but I don't think that's going to happen. However, James, so there has been some very interesting developments in the Vance Beltor shooting rampage, the whole saga against, Senator Melissa Hortman, and the whole thing there in Minnesota. So apparently, and for anybody that does not remember, Vince Beltor is the man that assassinated Senator Melissa Hortman and her husband, as well as shooting Senator Hoffman and his wife in Minnesota. And they say that it's him. Although if you see the pictures, you got a man wearing a rubber mask who looks very fit and strong. Yet after that, you see the next day a photo of this man from a surveillance camera wearing a cowboy hat looking like he had gained 100 pounds overnight. That does not make sense to me. But anyways, it's neither here nor there. James, I really thought they were going to kill him. I never thought they were going to allow him to be taken in alive, but he was. However, they found this letter that he wrote, James, and the letter specifically said that Tim Walz wanted him to kill Senator Amy Klobuchar so that he could take her seat. He's the governor for now, but a governor is only a state level employee, James. He wants to be a national level employee. Now, he did not run for governor, but that was not the whole point of this, okay? The whole point was if she were killed, the governor, I believe, gets to appoint the senator until there's like a special election or something. So why not say, hey, I'm going to give up the governorship to the lieutenant governor. I'm going to take Amy Klobuchar's seat. A lot of people are saying, oh, he didn't run for the Senate seat earlier. So no, he doesn't want it. No. He was waiting for a specific thing to happen. He knows that he's not going to win. I mean, look, he let Minnesota go up in flames in 2020. There's no way he wins a Senate seat out there. But he wanted a specific one. And do I believe Vince Beltor? He has no reason to lie. Why would he write a lie in a letter? He had no reason to lie saying this. And honestly, what else would be his motive for killing Hortman? They're trying to say that he was a MAGA supporter, James. But why would you kill a Democratic leader that just voted with MAGA against illegal health care or against health care for illegals? You wouldn't kill somebody that just did that for your side. But the biggest thing, James, and this is something I don't know if we talked about on the last episode. The biggest thing is news was just put out recently this week. There are actual rumors and pretty verifiable rumors that Melissa Hortman was about to leave the Democratic Party. That would give the Republicans the majority in Minnesota by one seat. Right now it's tied 67-67. Imagine Republicans having the majority in an ultra-liberal Minnesota, whereas apparently it's not as liberal as they thought if Republicans are going to have the majority. So she was killed by this Vance Beltor for no real discernible reason, James. No reason whatsoever. Then a cop who was, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, was supposed to kill him because this cop just decided, and you guys can look this up, this cop just decided to go look at Congressman Melissa Hortman's house, wanted to go check on her for no reason. There was no 911 call. There was no dispatch. He just decided to drive by and check her out. Yet this man was there right about to kill her, or did kill her. I don't know if it was right before or right after. Exchanged gunfire, and this man was able to get away. I personally believe that cop was sent there to kill that man after he did the deed. James, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's very likely. It's a crazy story, and isn't it interesting? It always seems like some major news events happen when these stories, as we start to dig in and research and dig down for the truth in these stories, like this assassination that happened in Minnesota, and that Tim Waltz is named as being part of it. Oh, we're bombing Iran. I don't know. I'm sure it's coincidence, but yeah, I don't know what to think about that whole thing. It's going to be interesting if he goes to trial. You know, his defense team can pull discovery, and things like those emails are going to come out. Did you see Tim Waltz at his funeral faking tears? He was like,
no, I didn't see the funeral part.
Yeah. He's like acting like he's crying over her death, which he had no love for that woman. She just voted against everything he stands for. So I don't know, man. It's a very strange story, and I'll be interested to see. But like everything else, it's going to be years before he even goes to trial, or a year at least. Think how long these things take to push through, which brings me to my next thing. Dan Bongino just posted something on X that we are fully prepared, ready, waiting, talking about the Iran. I want to remind our audience that Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi have been promising us documents on several events. And I'm going to say this every damn show, Jack, until something happens. We've got nothing. It really makes you wonder. I mean, it makes me step back and look at the Trump administration as a whole. Did we really get what we voted for? What happened to Doge? Ask yourself that question. Doge was the biggest thing, the coolest thing I'd ever seen. Been screaming for years about the waste, fraud, and abuse. And this guy comes in and starts making, and then Congress just votes to not cut the cuts that were made under Doge. What happened to the cocaine White House? What happened to the J6 tapes, Speaker Mike Johnson? There's still 7,000 hours of tapes out there that haven't been released. For what reason? Who's the SCOTUS leaker? I'm going to keep pounding this because these are the things we voted for. And Jack, we can't get too caught up in this bombing raid and forget about the other stuff that, quite honestly, Trump's letting us down. That's how I feel about it.
Well, and that's an interesting take. And that's why I like, our show, Secret America, as opposed to all other shows, because any show on the right, thinks of Trump as a god. Any show on the left thinks of the Democrats as their gods. And it's like, neither one on either side can do any wrong. But for us, we keep it real. We call out people on both sides. I do want to go quickly back to the whole Iran thing real quick. I want to show everybody something, okay? So check this out right here. We have right here, and it says, Iran threatens U.S. strike under self-defense clause. Iran actually said we reserve the right to strike the U.S. under the UN Charter's self-defense clause. Now, do I actually think that they're going to strike the U.S.? I don't know. That remains to be seen. But I will say that China actually just chimed in on this as well and said that the U.S. violated international law when we struck Iran. And I found that to be very telling because, that can be scary stuff right there when you have China and others, chiming in on this sort of thing. I mean, and you can see, especially right there, see where it says, China says the United States violated the UN Charter, international law, by striking Iran. And that's scary because China is a huge adversary of ours. They can very well, join Iran against us. And if I were another country, if I were a country like an Iran or China or another country, I would be, willing to join Iran and fight against them, because America right now does not have too many friends. All we have is people who we pay them money, and with U.S. aid shut down as it rightfully should have been, these other countries are not getting their money flow. So I don't see us having too many allies at the moment. I do like a specific comment right here that says, are we being hailed as saviors in Iran yet? Which is rather funny. That's funny because we are being hailed as saviors in Israel. There are actually, and I want you to see this, James. This is incredible, okay? I want you to see what they have actually put up on, let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Okay, yeah, here it is right here. I'm going to pull this up right here, and I want everybody to see this, okay? You can see right here where it says, "Thank you, Mr. President." They were putting this up all over. This is Tel Aviv's main highway right now. You can see where it says, "Thank you, Mr. President." Apparently, we are being hailed as saviors in Israel already, James. And that it's almost as if we're being manipulated into doing everybody else's bidding for them these days.
I know. I just don't get it. I mean, look, I've always been pro-Israel. I've always supported their right to exist. I've done deep dives. And
Did you say pro-Israel?
Yeah, pro-Israel. I'm pro the right for the Jewish people to have a homeland.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not pro-Israel on this thing. I'm talking in general terms.
Like their right to exist or their right to, gotcha. Okay.
Yes, and to have a homeland there. I believe it's an ancient homeland of the Jewish people, and I think they had a right to it. Now, that doesn't mean if I criticize the current Israeli leadership. See, what the game they're playing now, Jack, is if you criticize Netanyahu, the Israeli leadership, they immediately go to what? Anti-Semite. You're a racist. You're anti-Semite. No, I criticize our own government. That doesn't make me a commie because I criticize what someone in the Trump administration is doing. Here's another problem that most people are completely ignoring. They just voted for $1 trillion defense budget, from $860 billion to $1 trillion. Trump and Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, they are in the middle of trying to rebuild the U.S. military. The U.S. military has fallen to the greatest lows. Recruitment was down in every branch, and they're in the middle of trying to rebuild this. The last thing we need is to be looking over here. I just think that the timing is horrible. I mean, I hope it lasts a couple weeks, but I'm not super optimistic that this is going to be a short war.
Well, what's interesting is I just saw, so we talked about how Iran is saying that they reserve the right to strike the U.S. Now you got China chiming in. And remember how I said that this is either going to be something where it's terrorists, more terrorist organizations join, the terrorism in Iran, or this possibly starts a World War III. So you've got China chiming in right now with Iran. But now Yemen is chiming in, talking about they might even target U.S. ships. I want everybody to check this out, okay? So here, this says right here, Houthi militants in Yemen have now threatened to target U.S. warships and commercial ships in the Red Sea after President Trump's decision to strike Iran. You see, and that's also very interesting. You've got all these other countries, and while Israel is praising us, I don't see them coming and saying, hey, if you guys do this, we're going to do this. I don't see any other countries coming to the U.S.'s aid. So if this turns into an all-out war, I'm just saying it could be a big problem for us. In previous wars, James, those Middle East countries and other countries didn't have the capability to reach U.S. mainland. They might have been able to reach the end of the U.S. mainland with California and whatnot, but now all these countries do have capabilities, including unmanned drone capabilities, to reach all the way to the East Coast of the United States. They can attack anywhere in the continental United States now, and that is what is worrisome. People in America have seen wars fought from afar. And they think, it's just like television. Imagine if you're like the Middle East. What if America turns into like what the Middle East is like? Bombs exploding in buildings next to you, dead bodies littering the floor. I mean, now I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, and I think we're far away from that, because if they did that, America does have the capability to strike these people with nuclear weapons. However, I'm just saying that it is possible that these things can happen. They have the capability to reach American soil now, James. So you tell me, what's going to happen? Tell me. I want to know.
I don't know. I mean, we can postulate that, yes, there are sleeper cells. We know 20 million people were let in under Joe Biden. I saw someone on Twitter or X last night saying, this is just so awesome. Trump goes in, quick military strike. One thing you need to remember, Dan Caldwell talked about this as well as Mike Pence. There is absolutely no way, 0% chance of ensuring that the nuclear program in Iran has been taken out without people on the ground. This idea that we can strike from air and decimate their nuclear facilities, perhaps we decimated them, which means we blew up most of them, but there's no way. Iran probably already had the bomb. And, this is a point that no one ever talks about.
And that's what I was thinking too. They already have it.
Israel has hundreds of nukes. Why does no one ever talk about that?
I have no idea. I have no idea why Iran is the focus when I'm sure many other countries that hate America have nukes. I mean, that's the reality of the world we live in today. I mean,
it's an economic deal, Jack. Look, you've got the UAE, which I've been to Dubai. You've got Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, these other countries that have, I don't even know what you'd call them. They're monarchies with some democracy thrown in, but they're good trading partners. We do a lot with them. We protect them with a lot of our weapons. And in return, we get to buy their oil. We have trades. I think Trump honestly sees this as an economic opportunity. Look, even though Libya, Syria, Sudan, those countries have gone to hell, we still control them. We didn't control them when Gaddafi was in power. We didn't control Libya. When Assad was in power in Syria, we didn't control it. Now that the jihadis have been installed, there are jihadis. There are guys. So we now control Syria. And one of the biggest motivations for the whole Syrian thing, and it's been reported on ad nauseum, not in the mainstream by any alternatives, was a pipeline. That Syria wanted to allow Russia to pipe natural gas across Syria to Europe. That was the motivation. It wasn't about Assad, putting nerve gas on his own people. That was all made up. And remember, Trump, the only military action he did in his first term is what? He lobbed missiles at Syria. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, now I'm still a Trump supporter. I'm still pro-Trump. I'm hoping this thing works out the way. Yeah, we both are. And I'm hoping this thing works out the way that we think that he thinks it's going to work out. Before we move on to the next topic, I just want to say two more things. One, okay, apparently major U.S. cities are now on high alert following the airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. That is per Fox. Yeah. Now, the main thing I want to say, though, James, and this is something that might, it doesn't shock me, but it might shock others. Apparently, according to the betting market out there, and I know that sounds stupid, but believe it or not, they make their money on knowing things. They make their money on odds and statistics and hypothesis, okay? Iran, according to Polymarket, Iran is now more likely to obtain a nuclear weapon this year than it was before the strike, James. And honestly, that makes sense to me.
Well, expand on that a little bit. Well,
it just means that, so let's say that let's say that they were just, weren't really going to do the weapon. They were just, putting everything together in case they needed to. Now that you've struck our facilities, any hidden or secret facilities that we have, say we have a nuclear facility in this shoe factory that you think is a shoe factory. Well, we're going to ramp it up, and now we are going to get those nuclear weapons. You're going to tell us we can't have nuclear weapons? You're going to bomb our nuclear facilities? Oh, hell no. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, we just don't know what's going to happen, and all we can do is pray. And the people watching this live stream, pick it up later. We all need to pray. I mean, you and I are both Christians. We believe in the power of prayer, and I'm dead serious. We need to pray for peace. And I do want to give Trump. I've been pretty hard on him in this issue in this show. I know that he wants to be known as the president who brought peace to the world. One of his biggest promises was to bring peace to Ukraine and Russia. in that war. And I do think that he has been talking to Xi and Putin. I think there's going to be some, you could say you heard it here first. There's going to be some serious revelations unfolding there. And that the reason that G7 thing is so significant, that is Trump inviting Russia to be part of G7 and making it G8, is that it's really been the English imperialism, the monarchy in England that has controlled Western economic situations, and to bring Russia in, which is one of the largest countries in the world. It may be it's not the largest, one of the largest countries in the world, massive economic powerhouse. It really could bring about a different dynamic and peace. So I'm just going to throw this out. I'd love to hear you guys commenting what you think. Do you think that maybe, Jack, Trump has a long-term plan, and that this strike in Iran is just part of it, that we've got to get rid of these religious fundamentalists in these countries that rule, they don't want to trade with the West, and to bring about more global harmony? Now, that may be what he's being sold by the neocons, but do you think he believes that?
Honestly, I kind of do. And not only that, but I also believe that it's possible. Somebody has to do this, okay? In order for the world to have actual world peace, somebody has to take the weapons out of the hands of those that are willing to harm people without fear of harm coming to themselves. And that's the people that are in this particular religion, this cultist behavior that is scary, because they're willing to kill millions and they don't care if they're killed. And it's the same thing. Like we have a comment here from Free. He says, if he wants peace, he talking about Trump, he wants us to speak out against the war. I think he means he needs to speak out against the war. It's the only way he can stop it. The sheep cheering this on won't help, and he's right. Now I do say, though, that for this particular instance, in getting these weapons, at least trying to get these weapons out of the hands of people that don't care if they die, that's the only way to bring about any peace. I mean, it has to happen. The problem is, why is it always the United States that has to do it for the rest of the world? Why can't some of these other countries? Where's NATO? Where's the UN? Where is other countries, that want to step up and do the right thing? If I'm the U.S., I say, look, we won't mess with you if you don't mess with us. You can mess with other countries and we won't join. We won't stop you. That way, maybe the other countries will start stepping up and paying their fair share, doing shit that they should be doing. Where the hell's Great Britain and France? Where the hell is England? Where's Germany? Where's Japan? Where are all these other countries? Let me tell you where they are. Iran does not mess with them. And let me tell you why. Because they don't try to police the rest of the world, James. We try to police the rest of the world. And that's the problem with America right now. Now, we've already created a lot of enemies through the things we've done in the past. So do we have to disarm the people that hate us? We do. Do we need to start wars? No. But we do need to stop being the world's policeman going forward, and maybe we can stop creating new enemies.
Yeah, dude, I pulled something up the other day because I was just curious. Let me remind our listeners that before 9/11, I believe the U.S. had one military base in the Middle East, all of the Middle East. Do you know that we now have 50,000 troops? Let me just give you some of these. Qatar, 10,000. These are U.S. troops. Bahrain, 8,300. Kuwait, 14,000. The UAE, 5,000. Saudi Arabia, 3,000. Iraq, 3,000. Syria, 1,000. On and on. There's Jordan, Oman, Egypt, Turkey, Israel, and Djibouti. Now, I've been I know, right?
That country is the I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry.
Crazy. We've got 4,000 troops in Djibouti.
Djibouti. They're right in that. They're right in Djibouti.
Dude,
oh my God.
I went to Iraq. I was in a town called Erbil. It's in northern Iraq. It's about 50 kilometers from Mosul, which a lot of that. Now, this is really wild, man. The American embassy, I was opening an American coffee shop over there, a franchise that I work for. So I'd travel around the country and the world to open these classic rock coffees. So anyway, I went up on the roof with the owner one time, and I'm looking on, I'm like, what's that building? He's like, that's the American embassy. Don't stare at it. He literally reached up and turned my head. He goes, if you stare at that for too long, you're going to have guys in black outfits with M16s over here. I mean, because it had been bombed before. We have all these. Why do we have troops in Iraq? What business is it of ours? Why do we have troops in Qatar, in Kuwait? It's ridiculous. I'll tell you why, Jack. After World War II, England lost their place as the most imperialist country. They had all of these colonies. They lost India, they lost all these countries. And that was at the point in 1946 where the American hegemony began and where the American empire actually began. And there are people that have been pushing behind the scenes for, like you said, America's got to solve all these problems. I just wish we didn't. I don't think we do have to solve all these problems. I really don't. I think that blood and treasure would be much better spent here. I mean, I just watched a video of a mother in Detroit who allowed her son to die from malnutrition and hid him in a refrigerator for 3 weeks. I mean, the problem, I'm using that to highlight the problems we have in this country. This is supposed to be America first, and we're spending $20 million on a bomb in Iran. What the hell? Why aren't we focusing on domestic policy? That's what bothers me. And we're doing it on behalf of Israel. And I know we said we're going to get off this, but it's hard to get off this, Jack. It's pretty damn important.
Well, I mean, it is, and but the thing is, I do think after having time to reflect upon it, last night, I do think it was necessary to stop them from getting the nuclear weapon because they don't care if they die. They don't care about the mutually assured destruction, like I said, that we have with other countries. So they're willing to fire their nuclear weapons at us without fear of death themselves. Yes, go ahead.
But I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What evidence has been shown to us that they were any closer to making a nuclear weapon than they were in 1996 when Bibi Netanyahu said they were 3 weeks away? I mean,
Now that you're completely right, but I will say that it's better to do it while we can. No other president's going to do that. So Donald Trump doing it while we can could quite possibly help save future generations for now, because Iran is always going to have a problem with us because of things that have happened in the past. We can't change the past, but we can stop horrible things from happening in the future. Now, if we can just disarm these nuclear programs from countries that have the type of religion where it's such a cultist type behavior that they don't care if they die, that can cause serious problems to our country and many others. They can kill millions upon millions, not worry about if we fire a weapon back at them. So that's why I do think this was necessary. However, I do think it should stop there unless this happens. James, I want everybody to take a peek at this, okay? Right here, this guy says on the news in Iran, Arabian TV presenter, he was presenting a map of U.S. bases in their region. And it says, Mr. President, this is exactly what he said on live Iranian television. He said, you started it, we will finish it. The problem I have with this is the fact that they, I don't know how many people of theirs died in these attacks. I don't want to say many because I think we just hit mostly nuclear bases or mostly, nuclear facilities that pretty much run themselves at this point. But all of our U.S. bases in the region have most likely been evacuated for other areas at this point, just like Tehran was evacuated by like millions of its citizens already. I will say, though, that if he hits one of our bases with the intent of killing American soldiers, whether he did or not, that is what could cause problems. Now, if it ends here, James, if it ends here, where we destroyed most of their nuclear program, there's no more fighting or anything, we go back to peace talks or whatever, then that's fine. That's good. That's how it should be. But if it escalates, then it's what I worry about with Yemen threatening us now. China chiming in on this. You'll probably have Iraq, Vietnam, Laos. You got Cuba, maybe even Russia, which I highly doubt, though, because Russia actually respects President Donald Trump. There's just a lot of things in here that it's a powder keg, and it's just waiting to explode now.
Yeah, and you're so spot on to bring up the bases in the region, because I looked into this too. There's no doubt that Iran is going to attack those bases. I mean, it's going to be escalation after escalation. The Iranian parliament just voted to close the Straits of Hormuz. They control that. And like I said at the beginning, 80% of the oil coming out of the Middle East has to travel through that. So, there's going to be more airstrikes. And that's what we're all worried about. There's one word: escalation.
That's exactly right. And what I want to say to everybody that's watching right now is we are MAGA supporters. I am a huge MAGA supporter. Now, no matter what, and I'm still a Donald Trump supporter too. I believe that it was a good thing, a smart thing to stop them from getting the nuclear weapons. Now, what bothers me is I'm pretty sure they already have nuclear weapons at this point. It's been decades. I'm sure they have nuclear weapons, but at least we stopped their capability for now of building more nuclear weapons. You don't want a country that hates you and has no fear of death having nuclear weapons. So I can completely understand the strike there. But what James said was de-escalate, or escalation is what we're worried about. What we need now is de-escalation. And I think that Trump, with his forcefulness, could possibly cause escalation. Hopefully, J.D. Vance, with his softness, can cause some de-escalation, and we can get out of this without any further bloodshed. But what I wanted to say to everybody out there is, we are huge MAGA supporters. We all need to stick together in this movement. This movement is bigger than one person. No matter what happens, MAGA is not Donald Trump, okay? Donald Trump is the leader of MAGA at the moment. I am a huge MAGA supporter, but I'm also a Donald Trump supporter. But if forced to choose, I will choose MAGA, okay? Right now, I don't feel I'm forced to choose at the moment. I'm just letting everybody know that we are still on the side of both the movement and Donald Trump. And I wanted everybody to know that, before we go soon.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. We are MAGA supporter. I voted for Trump 3 times, but one of the biggest reasons I voted for him, I mean, definitely in 2016 or 2015, I was a single issue voter. It was anti-war. That's it.
Now, James.
Yeah.
We're not now, just so we know, there's no evidence yet that this is going to be a war. He did stop them from gaining future nuclear capabilities, at least for the moment. So far, he has not started any new wars yet. So that's why we got to, just see how it goes.
No, I agree. But, when I say anti-war, I'm against, using our military to project United States power around the globe, particularly when America is just suffering with so many issues. As I said in the earlier segment, what the hell happened with the DOJ and the FBI supposing to release all this stuff? What's going on with the economy? What's going on with all these other issues have been lost in the shuffle because of the 24-hour news cycle.
That's the problem.
And everyone's focused on this, and there's this fight within MAGA between the isolationists and the neocons. I don't know, Jack. I just think we're going to have to wait and see. And let's just hope and pray that it turns out the way that we want. And I appreciate you, brother. I love the new look for Secret America. He's Jack Danger. I'm James Clary. It's Secret America. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Secret America with Jack Danger and James Clary.